Good morning to our Unbossed Leadership podcast. Today with Thomas Van Eeckhout, the legendary co-CEO of Easi. And Thomas, we met each other more or less 1 year ago for the first time in Leuven, and I still remember so many details from our talks. And obviously, I told to our international unbossing friends and also to Deborah a little bit about your story, but everybody is very curious, and therefore I would like to give the floor to Deborah. Please, Deborah.
Okay, so hi, um, Thomas. So I've been really excited since I heard the story, and here on the Unbossing podcast, we're always looking for legendary CEOs like you who have been able to implement some of our values in terms of ownership and have made it work. I think for most people, when we talk about it, they assume, oh, you are all just consultants and you probably haven't even seen it in real life. But then when we have people come in who have actually done it and seen it work, then the story becomes more relatable. So it's good to have you here to talk about what you to start, and then from there share with us your story.
Mhm. Okay. I'm not sure if I got the full question there, Deborah, so maybe you can repeat it?
Ah, okay. So I really want to hear about you. To start, tell us a bit about yourself, and then from there we'll go on to hear more about your story.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Thomas, and indeed I am the CEO of Easi. Not sure if I'm a legendary CEO because that would be too much credit, I believe. Um, I joined Easi back in 2006 as an internal sales. Um, very early in my career. I only have one employer. I've always worked at Easi. I will probably end my career at Easi as well. Um,
Wow.
and I believe that we have found ways to create a company that is performing quite good, where people can have very sustainable careers and where people can basically find the right balance between being happy in what they do and everything that means, obviously, but also in driving results and driving growth and all of those things that we basically want to achieve as a company. And that really is what we do very well is we align people's ambitions with the ambitions we have as a company. And when you achieve that, then the role of CEO is the most easy role in the company. Yeah, that's basically what it's all about.
After you have achieved that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful.
Thomas, could you tell us a bit how the idea of your book came about?
Yeah, of course. I wrote a book, and in Dutch it's called The Gouden Tip van Ownership. So it's basically the golden tip of ownership, if I can translate it like that. The idea came because a lot of people contact me because they want to understand the model Easy has because they see the results, they see the awards, they see the growth, they see all of those things, and they're basically very curious in finding out how that works. And obviously, one thing that is very evident or very obvious from the outside is the fact that we have opened up the capital of our company. So today we have 150 shareholders, people that all work within the company, that have decided to invest in the company, that have decided to become a co-owner. Now, that is the very obvious thing for the outside world. Now, what people really need to understand is that there is one very important prerequisite if you want to implement such a model, and that is culture. It is about culture. So if you don't have the right culture, then it will be very hard to implement the shareholder model in an efficient and in a healthy way. So that's basically why the book the book I wrote covers those both topics. We basically start with the culture, and then we explain how we manage this shareholder employee concept. So that's basically the reason why I have decided to write that book. Yeah.
It's fascinating
That's for me.
I,
That's wonderful.
yeah, Deborah, I was seeing your face. I know you've done, I would say, hundreds of of culture workshops. Uh, Again, I leave the floor to you, Deborah.
Yes, because I'm excited to hear it because there is really a correlation between culture and then achieving certain goals and targets in the business. And so definitely you need to design your culture first to fit what you want to achieve. And I was when I was reading about everything you had done, and particularly you mentioned that your values play a significant role, and I'm sure that's what helps to define the culture very well. That's easy. And I wanted to find out how did you ensure that the culture and the values that you have were ingrained in everyone. And in an interview, I heard you mention the fact that you actually make sure that the people that want to buy the shares, even as employees, need to be aligned with your values. So how have you made sure that the values are being actually lived out, and how did you ensure that the whole company was fitting into the culture that you know you needed to be able to implement this model?
hmm Okay, so basically, when we talk about culture, I typically talk about two things. We talk about the values, what we expect from people, but we also need to create a context where we can make all of this happen, and that's when we talk about the personal
Yeah.
needs every individual has. So I'm going to talk about those two things. Maybe to start with our values. We have defined values. We have five values. We're talking about positivity. We're talking about caring, the way people treat each other. We're talking about responsibility, the way people take ownership. And we're talking about excellence and entrepreneurship, shareholdership. So those are the five values we have. Um,
Mhm.
I think a lot of companies have been working on values in general because we all feel that we need to change something. We want to bring a story. We want to bring a story to possible or potential employees, and we want to bring a story to customers, and that's when the values come in because basically consistently working with values creates in a way culture, but it also creates the brand that we have, and it creates the story that we can share and that we can bring to the market. So what we do with values, or what we did with those values, is first of all, if we just stop at putting those words on a slide, or if we paint them on the wall, and if
Yeah.
that's all we're going to do with values, then we've basically just wasted our time. And I do believe that a lot of companies are wasting their time with values. Why? Because they don't really integrate them in what they do. They just uh, tell people that they find something important, but if you don't walk your talk, then it will never work. I think credibility is very much is really key when we're talking about values, because you can claim to do something if in practice you're doing the exact opposite thing, then you're basically losing credibility. And I think you will have
Yeah.
the reverse effect. It might even affect you in a negative way. So what did we do, or what do we do? If you want to intervene, Thomas,
Yeah.
hesitate.
Thomas, I have to because uh, Thomas, you and I, we know companies, huge companies, where we can walk in and ask managers about the company values,
Yeah.
and they look at us with big eyes. What are you talking about? You mean something with excellence? I remember. Yeah. Let me have a look. Let me have a look on our website, and I will come back to you on that. We both know such companies exist, right, Thomas?
Yeah. Yes, indeed, indeed, and that's a yeah. I think those companies have basically wasted their time, and they would have been better off just drinking beers at the bar instead of instead of trying to think about values that they want to claim they find important. Now, what do we do? I think it all starts with describing them in detail, and really describing what do we understand by those values, but also what do we expect from our people, giving examples of the opposite of those values, and that really is important. Why? Because we want to start using those values as a compass, to decide whether we hire candidate A or B. We want to use it as a compass to decide whether we promote somebody or not, whether we allow a certain person to buy shares or not, whether we allow somebody to evolve towards leadership or not. And if we want to do that, then we really need to describe them. I think the best example is, let's talk about responsibility, which is one of our values. If responsibility is just a word that we put on the wall, and if we have a discussion with a candidate in a recruitment process, and we're just talking about responsibility, we will all agree that responsibility is important. And I have never met a candidate who told me, "Yes, Mr. Van Eeckhout, I align with your values, but not responsibility. I don't like responsibility." Everybody likes responsibility. In that specific context of an interview, we will all claim that we like to take responsibility. But it becomes slightly different when we have described responsibility in a way where we say that we also have responsibility towards our customers to implement decent and sustainable solutions. Now, that means that if a customer asks us to develop something in a way that we're not convinced that it will really have a positive impact, a positive outcome for our customer, then it is our role to challenge that. And that means when we're talking about responsibility, that we're also talking about assertiveness. We're also talking about challenging a customer in a meeting room filled with people, where we basically have to take a stand, and where we have to challenge those opinions. So when we have described responsibility in that detail, then people then we can really use that as a differentiator, and we can and the discussion basically changes, and we're talking about what we need to talk about. And that is the reason why we find it important to really describe them in detail. So that's basically what we do. We use those values to in our hiring process. We use it when we decide to allow people to evolve. We evaluate values with our people as well, which might seem a bit weird, but we find those values too important to just leave them to just not manage them as we feel that we should manage them. So that is,
Thomas, I don't find it weird. I find it only consequent.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, one question, Thomas, when you say you are describing these values, so you mentioned the values in words to us, and these words speak to me. But when you say you describe them, how is it then that you describe an expected behavior? If then this, or how is this description looking like?
Yeah, it's basically it covers a couple of things. First of all, why do we find this important? What is the outcome for the company if we really commit to those values? What will happen? We also describe what we expect from our people. What is the behavior, the attitude we expect when talking about those values? And we also describe the opposite. What is the opposite of taking responsibility? The opposite of taking responsibility is just doing what somebody asks you to do. Now, responsibility is also about doing the right thing. It's also about challenging things, and so indeed, those are typically the things that we try to cover in those descriptions.
Thank you. Can I shortly also chime in, because this is for me so interesting? Imagine, Thomas, you have a person or a leader within Easi who brings fantastic business results. Uh, getting great customers, somehow making the economics work, great margins. Wow. But at least one or even two of your values are not respected by this person.
Yeah.
First, did that already happen and how do you react?
Yes, it did happen. Um, and it's an opportunity to put your values in practice, because the only good solution is to end the collaboration. That's the thing. That's basically it's a gift. It's an occasion. It's an opportunity to show that our values are really important. And when deciding based on values, it will always be a trade-off, and the impact will typically be um, negative financially on the short term, positive culture-wise on the long term. That's typically what we see, but it's necessary to take that very hard decision of ending that collaboration. Now, obviously, we don't do that overnight, and we think about it, and we have an action plan, and we try to work with people to get them on to get them to really align with all of those values. But in some cases, it's just yeah, we did everything we could, and it's just not working out. So when that happens, we need to take that tough decision. Why? Because it will have a negative impact on culture if we don't do that. And I think the most important thing that we're losing, if we don't decide, that it's credibility. Um, and that's basically the reason I said credibility is so crucial when talking about values, because I can write 10 books about values. If I'm deciding to promote a guy for his results, despite the fact that he doesn't align on values,
Mhm.
and my credibility is going down the drain. And I do believe that it will have even a negative effect, because people will completely, yeah, they will completely decommit from those values, everybody in the company. And that is something that will have a very negative impact on the long term. So it's always about making decisions. In business, it's always about making decisions, but even more when talking about values. And that's where it becomes difficult.
Mhm.
I could grow faster if
Yeah.
if I systematically hired, for example, sales managers from our direct competitors. But the potential risk when I bring in somebody to manage a team who does not align with our values, the impact will be huge. So it's always about taking a bit more time, but we're doing the right thing on the long term. And we might grow a bit less fast, but it will be way more sustainable.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thanks, Thomas. And Deborah, I don't know how about you, but are you also reminded on our talk with Jason Lippert from Lippert Industries in the US when you listen to Thomas?
Yes, absolutely. I think he said something similar about values and the fact that sometimes you spend too much time trying to hold on to others who don't align, and that can actually affect. So they were trying to do a transformation, and he that was one of the things he had regretted most, like spending too much time trying to get everybody to subscribe to the values, right? And so yes, it
And
sounds really similar.
yeah, thanks, Deborah, because that brings me to my next question, Thomas. Um, so in the case of Lippert Industries, that was a transformation. Yeah. Uh, and in the case of Easy, has it always been like that? Was it already founded with that intention instead of values? Or was there also a transformation, Thomas?
It never was a transformation. Um, we started, Easy has been founded in 1999 by Salvatore Curaba and Christian Castelin. Salvatore hired me in 2006. Um, and he always, because in those early stages of a company, I don't know if you need to spend a lot of time on those values. I think it helps, but At least at Easy, it was not the case. And
Hmm.
Salvatore did that very much based on gut feel. Now there comes a time when gut feeling just isn't enough. So that's basically, I think, 9 or 10 years ago, we started to work on that in a more conscious way, and we really we, 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 we made the model. But what we did was basically we put on paper what we all felt, and we formalized the gut feeling. Now, once you formalize things, once you write things down, once you start to structure the model that you have been building throughout those years, then it becomes more clear. And when things are
Hmm.
becoming more clear, it allows you to strengthen them even more. To give you an example, it's impossible to hire based on values systematically throughout the company if you don't have them in writing. Then that
Hmm.
difficult, and then it's basically just gut feeling of the person that is having that discussion. Now, you if you write them down, then it becomes easier to really stick to them and to make it work and to really integrate them. So that's basically what we did at a certain point in time. Was we didn't think about the values we wanted to have inside of the company. No, we looked at the company and we tried to figure out the values we had, and we wrote those down. So that and that allowed us to strengthen them even more.
Thomas, what you're saying is you didn't invent these values. You kind of went into reflection, were looking each other in the eyes and said, "Hey, what are for us as individuals and as business people the uh, the deciding values?" And Thomas, question: what triggered you to do that?
I think one thing that triggered us is we participated, I think, in 2014 for the first time in the Great Place to Work um,
Hmm.
competition. And we first time we entered, we gained fourth place, which is quite exceptional. Most companies take some time before they enter the top 10. And second year, we were number one. Now, when you're number one, you need to go on stage. And when you go on stage, they give you the mic and they ask, well, what's the recipe? And I remember Salvatore was standing on stage holding the mic, and and he didn't really have a response. So he was talking about ambitions and about projects and about opportunities and growth. But and I remember having a chat with him the next day, and he wanted to change that. We felt we needed to crystallize that story because there were so many elements that we did differently. It wasn't just about being ambitious and having projects. No, it was about having a very deep connection with people, and that's where we basically came up with. I think the values that was the trigger to start working in a decent way with those values, but it was also the trigger to understand what we did differently on a lot of other domains as well. And that's where we came up with those needs that I already mentioned in developing culture. So that's basically that was the starting point. And again, once you think about those things and once you start to write them down, then it becomes easier and easier to consistently do the right thing.
Thomas, this is fascinating, this story, and you know it. It reminds me a lot of what we did at Teens Zeuger without writing it down, and out of gut feeling, many things which I call unbossing today, which I would never have called them 5 or 8 years ago. And Deborah, just for you to chime in on this so important element of Thomas saying, write it down, define it. Uh, what do you say, Deborah?
Yeah. Yep. So I think so for me, I work with over here. Sometimes I do work with startups, and they start just with a few number of people, and they sort of say, "Oh, I want type of person, or I want them to have this kind of attitude. And it really does take a while before they can actually say that, okay, this fight, it becomes a problem because now other people creep in when the business is growing, and then they don't even see where it went wrong because it's not written down. So it's really good that at some point you said, no, we need to actually write it down and then seal this magic formula and continue to win, right?
So I think, thanks, there was a learning for everyone. Uh, Again, what Thomas said, you have then at a certain point of time, especially if you're on grow mode, you have to write it down, dear listeners. You have to define it. You have to go through that introspection.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, there is another element which is so close to our heart, and that is the element of ownership. And why is that? Because I hear so many clients or not clients saying, yeah, we want to have a partnership relationship with our employees, eye to eye, treat them as adults. And I often had this reflection very honestly, okay, you can talk a lot about real partnership, but if in fact you look back, you are not partners if you are a full employee and the other person is holding the capital. So how did that come about, Thomas? And what tips could you give to other CEOs who would like to implement that and already start complaining to you on how difficult that all is?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start off by again insisting on the importance of culture. Because if you don't have the right culture, then it will become difficult, or you will face challenges and obstacles when implementing it. And I can give you an example, maybe later on. Now, how did we do this, or what was the trigger or the starting point for Easi? Is that I mentioned that Easi has been founded by two people, Salvatore and Christian. And around 2010, 2011, they decided to split up. So Christian left the company. Salvatore bought his shares, but it was it was quite of it was a very important moment because Salvatore basically had to buy those shares, which gave him quite some financial pressure, basically, and he wanted to be sure that there was continuity and stability. So he decided to allow 10 people to join in the capital at that moment. So what he basically did was he put himself obviously under an impressive amount of pressure, and at the same time he took all of that pressure and he put it on our shoulders. Not in an opportunistic way because he didn't want that pressure, but because he was convinced that pressure would allow us to do the right thing for the company on the long term. Basically when he did that based on gut feeling, as I explained, and he asked us to make it a sustainable model. So he basically gave us the mandate to come up with the model that would allow us to do that in the best possible way and to make sure that we were able to welcome new shareholders every year. And he basically just told us, my ambition is to have as many shareholders as possible, but there's one condition. Those shareholders need to be ambassadors of the company. They need to be ambassadors of our model. They need to be the people that really push the company forward. And that's the model that he basically put in our heads, and he asked us to really to come with rules and principles to make this a reality. There's basically a couple of things that are very important in that model. The first one is, who do we allow to become a shareholder? And I already explained that we're really looking for ambassadors. So that's why we say that people need to align with our values. They need to have a minimum score in the evaluation of their values. That's the first. The second condition is they need to have a minimum amount of seniority inside of the company. We don't allow people to come in, to join Easi, and to buy shares right away. That would be
Mm-hmm.
too easy. You need to earn that. So they have to have 2 years inside of the company. Because in 2 years, that's typically you go through a more difficult phase as well, and that's really what
Mm-hmm.
we want. We want to see how they react when pressure is high, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
reason they need to have that minimum period inside of the company. Another important element is that they need to invest. They need to put money on the table.
All
Because
right.
if it's just a gift, and we all know that if my daughters ask me for something and I just give it to them, and then it will always have less value compared to when I go into a discussion with them and I explain and I ask them to achieve certain things before receiving that gift, and that gift will have more value. So it needs to be a very conscious decision. It is, and we're talking about 25,000 euros minimum. So it's quite
Mm-hmm.
the amount. I don't know about you, but if I spend 25,000 euros, I have a quick chat with my wife to make sure that we're both okay to spend money in that side project. So that is really what we want to do. It is, and sometimes we have a lot of young people in the early stages of their career, people that have 25, 30 years old. They're starting to buy a house. They have young kids. They're
Mm-hmm.
settling down. And that's the moment we ask them to invest that amount of money. So it really is a conscious decision if they decide to do so. So and because of that conscious decision, that really makes it changes a lot. That means that it is logical to have a discussion with them. It's logical to have a discussion with them on, okay, what are your plans? You're putting
Yeah.
25,000 euros on the table. What are you going to do to make sure that Easi will someday be the best company in the world? Because that is the dream that we all share. And as a shareholder, you have a direct impact on achieving that. So that's the context that we try to create.
Oh, oh, oh. But Thomas, this is first for all our listeners, because I want to make sure that everybody heard that. At Easi, there is an evaluation of the employees on the values.
Of course.
Please let that sink in, listeners. There is an evaluation regularly on the values. And now I just heard you, Thomas. You said being the best company in the world. I didn't hear you saying the best IT company. That
No.
strikes me.
Yeah, I'm convinced that we could sell pencils and be worldwide leader in selling pencils. But hey, we're in IT, so let's try.
Yeah.
But yeah, because the way that, yeah, I believe that it's that what we do is not as important as how we do it. But that's just my opinion, and it's also
It's not only your opinion, Thomas. And I have to ask you now also another thing is to me, but I want like to have that confirmed. Are you the person who really did the the heavy lifting in Easi to formulate these values, to formulate that concept, and to use your amazing storytelling talent to get that message across? Is that right?
um, it's a group effort. I think the what what maybe my achievement is indeed to crystallizing the story, continuously challenging the organization,
Yeah.
giving mandates to the right people, and making sure that we consistently do what we feel is important to do. Um, but I think I have two responsibilities, and that is creating a context, first of all. That is maybe the most important one. And then the second one is setting the example. And that's basically what I try to do. But it's very much a group effort. It's not I didn't decide the values. The values were there. We wrote them
Ah,
down, and I yeah obviously telling the story gives me very much energy. So that is something that I just enjoy doing. And it is something that I typically do internally, and yeah, so that's my role, yeah. But heavy lifting as a CEO, I'm not a heavy lifter. Um, I really I think I have the easiest job in the company.
thank you. I meant the heavy lifting a couple of years ago when you were all sitting around and I said, oh, somehow has to put that here in somebody has to put that here into place. But Thomas, when you say, I mean, the ambition is quite strong. What I hear from you, and plain and simple, can you tell me what makes you convinced that Easi and the concept of Easi is such a competitive advantage to a- and how do you feel this competitive advantage playing out? Where do you see it?
Yeah, I think. Well, what I do want to stress as well is that we're far from perfect. I think we're doing amazing things in a couple of domains, but we really still need to improve on a lot of different in a lot of different other domains. What gives me the feeling that today it is a unique selling proposition is, first of all, people want to work for our company. They want to work for our company. So it's a very conscious decision that because our story is so clear and it's so it allows us to differentiate ourselves, and so people really are convinced about that story and they want to join our company. Customers have the same feeling. They want to be part of our adventure. They work with us because they believe in our culture rather than they work with us because we have one consultant that seems to be the expert in a very specific domain, which in some cases could be interesting, but it's not very sustainable because if that would be our USP, then our whole company would depend on individuals, and that's exactly the opposite of what we want. We never want to depend on individuals. We want to depend on culture and on values. So that is what gives me the feeling that it indeed is a unique selling proposition. Then again, the market is helping us. I believe if today a company needs to decide on a new IT partner, then that company needs to evaluate the HR policy of that company. Because if you're signing an agreement with a company that doesn't succeed in attracting, retaining, and developing talent on the long term, then you're basically signing it's an empty box. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so if
With a brand name on it. Yeah.
yeah, with a brand name on it. But if you don't have the guys and girls that are going to do it, then you're going to hit the wall. So I think that's basically what the reason I'm convinced that it is working, because customers are sometimes okay to pay a bit to pay a higher price, but to have that reassurance that we take care of our people, that people will stay on board, that we're working on developing their talent, and that really makes the difference. And there's nothing as powerful as explaining that the project manager, dear customer, that who will be responsible of your project, decided to invest in the company. He took
Yeah.
his
It's also a
savings
partner.
he took his savings and he invested that in the company. So that was a very conscious decision. So whenever you are experiencing challenges in your project, know that you have somebody who is not just waiting for his monthly check. No,
Yeah.
he wants to build the best company in the world on the long term, and that will and you will benefit from that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or is gone when tomorrow Accenture calls, or I don't know who now. Just
Yeah.
nothing against Accenture, just mentioning a name.
Yeah.
But Deborah, Have you ever heard that this new element what Thomas is bringing in, namely culture, not only as an internal exercise, but even even radiating to potential customers, Deborah?
Yeah, no, so to be honest, I saw it the first time when I was reading his interview and he says, "Oh, customers are really curious about it," and when we explain to them that there's passion and drive for your project, then people are really interested, and then it is a selling point for them. Then I was really excited to think about it again. Okay, wait, how have we never seen it that way? That customers, because for most of the time when we do talk about customers, we are thinking when we just write it on the boards and make them feel like, oh, we do care about people, we care about the environment, is why they pay for it. But then actually, it's that it actually benefits them as well, that we have people that care about the success of their projects, etc. And it's exciting to hear.
Yeah. And same for me. It's a new element. Thomas, I always ask that question at the end of the podcast, and maybe you know it. And the question is, if I am now a CEO of a similar company somewhere in Mexico, somewhere in the south of Spain, and I am very much inspired by what you did and want to do the same, what is the single biggest mistake which I have to avoid at any price, in your opinion?
Not being consistent. That's the most important thing, and I would say, and it's also an advice that I would like to give. It's spot opportunities to make it a reality, um, and that's basically what I explained. Firing that top sales guy.
This gift, what you call the gift, the opportunity.
it, it's a gift, yeah. And another example, we in our executive committee, we have some rules that we have decided on. We decided to lower our salary last year by 20%. We decided that if we really want to give opportunities to grow to everybody inside of the company, then we need to put an end date on our mandate in the executive committee. So at a certain age, we move out of the executive committee, because that is the only way we can really allow people to take responsibility and to grow inside of the company. So that would be my advice, to try to spot those opportunities, to really make it very explicit, because that's the potential risk with culture, is that we don't make it explicit. And when it's not explicit, then it's not a story. A story has a book needs pages and needs an intro, and it needs to be something that you can pick up and that you can read and that you can understand. So make things explicit would also be an advice that I would like to share.
Thomas, thank you so much. It's you know it yourself. It's inspiring. It's also the reason why the book is such a hot topic. And I would like to give the last word to Deborah. Deborah, I think you are on mute. Yeah.
Sorry. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming, Thomas, because this was a really good conversation for me, especially with highlighting the importance of culture in building like a really amazing workplace. And I think you fundamentally changed the dynamics between the employer and the employee by business, and the results are pretty evident. And so thank you for taking the time to share this with us and to help inspire others who have been trying to take this step but are a bit nervous about it, and making it seem like, oh, it's actually as possible. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thomas, thank you so much.